Speaking of reliability, a podcast with good friends talking with you about reliability engineering topics. Welcome to Speaking of Reliability. This is Fred Schenkelberg.
And this is Greg Hutchins. Hi, Fred. How are you?
Hey, Greg. Doing fine. Thank you. Hey, we trade emails and chat on a regular basis, which is always enjoyable. And so I appreciate all that. And you'd sent me a couple pieces over the last week that kind of sparked some ideas for me. And then it kind of tipped my hand this morning. A former neighbor of mine sent me a message saying, "Oh, I heard you guys are in a state of emergency for monkeypox." And he moved out of the country. So I don't know what status they're in and where they're at. And I mentioned to him, I says, "Oh, I thought the swine flu is the one that was going to kill us all." And he goes, "Swine flu? Did I miss something?" I says, "Well, that was 10 years ago, or I don't know, 3-4 years ago, or whenever it was a while ago." But there was this, just in the flus, there was swine flu, there was, and I'm drawing a blank. There was like H1N1 and H1N2. There was this version. Just in the COVID, we're up to BA5. They got rid of the Greek alphabet, I guess, and part of the conversation I had with Jamie when we were, trading email this morning was that it's like, yeah, it's another one. And I see that, in the community and stuff. People are letting their guard down, and the local health officials are saying, "No, hey, we're still people are getting sick, and people are still transmitting this, and it's still evolving." But part of it is, and then you sent me one that just made me laugh. It was a beach, I guess, in Australia. Why don't you describe that image real quick for our audio audience?
Well, it's a cartoon, and basically the cartoon's read, anybody who's running needs to have a safety helmet. And it shows a cop right below that. And what stunned me was...
Oh, and fines apply.
And fines apply. So just get the visual. You're in a nice beach in Australia and you're running. And the local folks, constabulates, or, the local cops are giving out tickets for runners who don't have helmets. So anyway, somebody says, "Well, this is a big risk issue." And I was surprised at the number of people, almost 100, who really believed this image.
Well, the Australians are very conservative people.
Well, to me, it was like, okay, somebody, they punked somebody. It was a joke. But the number of folks who believed it was simply astounding. And these are very smart risk folks. And I'm thinking, are we losing our sense of humor? Is this is this really the basis of misinformation or disinformation on the web? What's going on here?
Yeah.
Because it was basically a risk joke. Whoever came up with this picture.
Oh, it was great. It was a beautiful looking, warning sign with little arrows on it saying, falling hazard and all that other good stuff on it, and fines apply. And what made me laugh was the officers standing there, in full regalia and stuff, didn't have a helmet on, so they couldn't run after you if you ran past them. They'd be taking their life in their own hands. But when we were chatting about this back and forth for a little bit, and I equate it to, I remember going to see one of the guys he was a electrical engineer in charge of designing one of the circuit boards that I was on the project I was working on. And I'm a reliability guy. And I'd darken his doorway and he would look sad. And he goes, what? How come I get such a reception? He says, "Well, every time you show up, you tell me about a problem. It just adds to what I got to go to work on. Why don't you bring me solutions?" And he said, "You just walk in and tell me how bad my design is. That's all you ever tell me, is how bad it is. You want to do an FMEA, or you want to do a hazard analysis, or you want to, all your reliability stuff tells me everything fails." It's like, it's not helpful. So he just got tired of seeing me. But part of our role, whether it's in risk or in quality or in reliability, is to spot areas for improvement, is euphemistically saying, hey, this sucks, you got to fix it. But it's, if I walk into your office every day and say, hey, this is bad, this needs attention, we need to divert resources here, we need to pay attention to this. There's a monkeypox today, and there was COVID last couple of years, and then there was swine flu prior to that, and then there was some other flu named after prior to that, and it's like people don't stop listening to you, and I think there's part of it is just in how you deliver messaging and why it's important, what needs to be taken care of. What's the fable where the little boy cried wolf and then eventually got eaten by a wolf?
Well, that could be a metaphor for a lot of professions, maybe even quality, where people come in to a boss or maybe to a larger group and say, we got a problem. And you say that enough times, like crying wolf, what happens? People eventually stop listening, and then they finally say, we don't need this function anymore, like whatever it is, quality, reliability, whatever it is.
They're just, bringing us one problem after another. And, one of the hard parts is that if you actually do bring solutions and go fix stuff and help people design a more robust product or higher quality or more stable or whatever, then those problems don't occur. And so it's not, you're doing it right is so much less visible, rather than waiting for a disaster occurring and saying, oh, I can fix that, I know what the problem is. That's a whole separate podcast, I think. But the people that we're communicating with and who the web is communicating with and who the health officials are trying to communicate with are like, enough, I've heard enough of this. I'm not paying attention anymore. I don't want to change what I'm doing. And I think that's part of the problem, is that we're just getting tired of bad news all the time.
So what we call it, decision fatigue?
Yeah, I think that's what we put on the title.
Yeah, we just simply get tired of the problem, tired of the person giving us the problem, tired of the messaging, tired of everything.
Yeah. So there's two paths that seem to be taking place. And one of them is people respond to or react to things they really shouldn't react to. And I think even in, talking about investigating quality or reliability problems, you need to do your homework to make sure that it really is a problem and what's the potential impact. Because I think that's the second part of it, is that you actually have to think it through and do it. It's like that sign you mentioned, is that people believed it without really looking at it or thinking it through at all. I think one of my favorite comments on that posting you did was, you can't run along the beach without a helmet on it, but you can go swimming with the great white sharks every day. That's fine.
Yeah, well, that's the irony. And maybe, we just simply take things at face value and then don't go a step further asking why. I mean, I don't expect folks, when they see this joke or they see a meme, to go do an RCA, a root cause analysis.
Right.
But they should go at least one step further, saying, am I being punked? Is this real? What are the consequences?
But it's like, I had one boss years and years ago that I heard about a field failure problem. And I was like, in knowing the components and how the failure occurred, this could be a serious problem. And I mentioned it to her, and she said, well, it's only one. If you get 3 of these in a short period of time, then come tell me. It was kind of her filter saying, all right, one off is not going to end the day. Let's wait until we see a pattern. And so I got back to my desk and I had 2 more emails with 2 separate divisions having the exact same problem, same issue of this particular component. So I turned right back around and said, yep. And of course it was a Friday afternoon. I said, yep, I think we've got a pattern here. And it turned out to ended up in legal battles, and I lost track of what was going on, but there was some major issue with the manufacturing of some components, and we happen to find it. But it's we put in all these different mechanisms to protect ourselves, and one of the ways we do it is go, well, that's just more information. I'm not going to invest to figure out whether it's true or not. I'm just going to, okay, I'll deal with that. Or okay, it's bad news, or I'll add it to the list, or whatever, without it getting its full due. And if it is really humor, then enjoy the humor. But if it's really a sign of a change that's coming on, well, I'm tired of dealing with the change. I'll look at that later. I wait till the third one appears, kind of thing, the way my boss did it. But what do we, if we're in the role of saying, hey, here's a set of risks that you need to face, how do you get past that set of barriers, or fatigue is probably the right word. How do you get past that to where we can actually effectively take action?
That's a good question.
And by the way, you got 5 minutes. So.
Okay. So I've done a couple of these. One on the one that had a number of these. So the senior management, meaning about 4 levels above me, wanted to know, what is the material impact to the organization? In other words, what's it going to cost me? Mm-hmm. And in one case, it was a life issue, or maybe multiple different lives. And another one was a cost issue. So I'll cover both of them sort of quickly. One basically dealt with natural gas piping. What we were using at those days, many years ago, was iron. Basically, take male and female fitting and basically thread them together. And to make sure that the pipes were gas tight, we would use a sealant, essentially, along the threads. Mm-hmm. Well, a little investigation, because I was head of quality. For many years, we had been using the wrong thread sealant. Natural gas, of course, is very combustible. It's got a mercaptan. You can smell it. But basically, we'd put in a couple 100,000 homes using the wrong sealant. And again, this was many years ago. Mm-hmm.
Oops.
A whoops. It was a big whoops, unfortunately. So basically, senior executives, meaning the president and the board, decided they were willing to accept the risk. Second problem, and again, I had to deal with a materiality issue.
Well, it's and I can imagine it's, what kind of reports have we had? What kind of environments are they in, and what kind of situations would the sealant fail, or will they all fail at some time? Or, a lot of good information can go into informing that kind of decision, I'm assuming.
Yes, and basically, how many people could die? What's the cost of litigation? Mm-hmm. Cost of death? I mean, unfortunately, it came down to that.
Yeah.
The second thing was, I'm trying to figure if I can talk about this, but I guess I can. You see in California, you have a lot of high voltage transmission lines.
Yeah, some of them don't work well. As I'm sitting here in California.
That's the problem. They were put up 40, 60, 100 years ago, and there was a life expectancy of 40 years. And now 100 years is coming up, and these pieces are failing. The attitude of many utilities was run to failure, which basically means when something craps out, there's a swath of area essentially that is blacked out, and they'll send out a crew to repair whatever it is. The shackle, the bolt, the whatever it is.
Yeah, well, that's fine if you're combating, random type issues, a tree falling against your pole and knocking it askew and breaking the line, or helicopter driving through the power lines, or, hot air balloon shorting them out when they're 20 years old. But now you go out and fix one that, corroded through. The pole in front and behind that on that line are probably just about to fail. So it's a different battle now, in my mind.
And that's the problem. So the first place is figure out if the damage is material, it's reportable to the SEC and the shareholders, and what's the risk to the organization. Put a dollar value on it. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. In the second case, and I've been involved with probably 3 or 4 of these. What is acceptable 20 years ago, 10 years ago for an organization is no longer acceptable. In other words, the risk appetite of the organization fundamentally changes. So let's take PG&E. Old rule was run to failure. Now, the state of California is actually going after the board and senior management, meaning executive VP, president, and going after criminal damages. Mm-hmm. So not only is a civil exposure, meaning dollar, but it's also criminal exposure. So as a quality or risk practitioner, we have to be aware of what is the current state of politics.
Well, there's a bit more motivation for these major decision makers because it's personal now.
It's much more personal. You can't waive it. You can't have insurance basically take the risk.
Right.
You are engaged. So as a quality reliability professional, it's really up to us to put a dollar value, identify the risks and the exposure, both to the organization and the people.
Yeah. I know PG&E's in local news is they're between a rock and a hard spot because they got so much equipment out there that needs work or replacement, and they only have so much money. They just and time and resources. Even if they wanted to, they don't have 10,000 employees to go rewire the state. So they projection last year I saw was that in order to take care of the high transmission lines would take something like $18 billion in 30 years. I was like, what? And I think the criminal part is the CEOs 30 years ago that didn't address that, but they're long gone. They're moved on and are out of the picture. But there's this issue of deferred maintenance that I deal with all the time with clients is, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of mentality. Mm-hmm. But the hard part is that's the message back to them is, well, deferring a decision does not mean you don't have to do the decision. It's just going to cost you more later when it's an emergency and all hell breaks loose and you have to pay 3x the cost to get the parts you want expedited over to get the system running again. You could have prevented that by having the spare sitting there that at normal price and ready to go. It says, why would it's a constant battle. Why would I spend $10 today when I could, spend $100 later to fix it when it's an emergency? I just don't get that logic. Why are you pushing off these decisions to divert something to preventative maintenance or to preventative cases or preventative actions to mitigate risks so that they don't happen? And that's one of them that gets me all the time. But I think back to your point, it's this, well, what's the material cost here? Why is this important? What's the priority of this? What's the evidence that shows that this is a systemic problem? But even then, that's a difficult process to get through to people.
Well, and if you're essentially a reliability engineer, quality engineer, even a quality director, you're not going to have those discussions with somebody 3-4 levels above you. And quite frankly, a lot of senior management do not want to be told that there's a problem.
Well, that's a whole different podcast, I think, is the culture, the culture of fear kind of thing. I think that's a two-way street. Is the senior management has to recognize they need to see the warts and hear what the risks they're facing really are. But simultaneously, is the people that are generating the awareness of that need to communicate it really well and be very, very clear of the true impact or potential impact.
There's a rule now in most companies. If you know it, meaning if you know something that is going to have a safety or an environmental or a substantial risk to it, you need to have controls.
Yeah. You see that all across, I agree. I see that in a number of different places. It's in some companies do that well, and it gets its due diligence and it gets, prioritized and thought through and executed if it needs to be, and so on. And others are, it's like the suggestion box that you can't get another slip of paper into it because it's never been opened.
Yeah, and that basically separates the great companies from the would-be companies.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that might be that might be the summary right there. Is part of what we do in reliability, quality, risk, and all of these other areas is influence decisions, and there is a general fatigue going on with just if you're just every day bringing in bad news, which might be perfectly valid and true. Part of it is how well you message that or convey it, and what's the true impact, and where's your evidence and stuff like that. Every day the sky is not falling, to use another metaphor or fable. Yet, it also takes the other side of that coin, is the folks that are making decisions have to be willing to listen and to understand and what's the right word, Greg? Grok. I wonder if that's even in the dictionary. It might be in the Urban Dictionary. But
Probably the urban.
yeah, they need to fully understand. The German word is Gestalt, the whole picture kind of thing. And so it runs the gamut. And I know that organizations are better at this than others, and the way we play a role into it can make a difference. And so if you're listening to this, let us know where you stand. Are you struggling with this decision fatigue, or this folks just not wanting to hear the bad news anymore? Or is that part of their culture? Or do you have an example that's really good? Either way, we'd love to hear about it. Head over to accendoreliability.com/go/SOR. And there you can find a couple of ways to get a hold of us. Greg and I and the other hosts of the show are available through LinkedIn, which seems to be the most popular way to get in touch with us, or through our About pages. All kinds of ways to get in touch. But we'd love to hear what your experience is. And if you've any questions or anecdotes or maybe a fable I missed, let us know. We'd love to hear from you. So, Greg, I think we just scratched the surface of this one. I know that we've been trading messages all week on it, but I think there's more to it. So we probably need to make some notes for some future episodes here real quick.
Yeah, I'll leave with one final thought. If you want to get promoted over the next couple of years, bring your boss's problems and solutions and implement them, and you'll move forward and upward.
Yeah. Thanks, Greg. Talk to you soon.
All righty, buddy. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Speaking of Reliability. We invite you to join the conversation. If you have a question or a topic that you think we should discuss in a future show, please let us know. You can find a comment box below the episode show notes, or just leave a note as part of a review on iTunes.